The Baylor Bears have major issues right now, and I think it's time to ask the question, is this an NCAA tournament team? This is the Locked On Baylor basketball postgame.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Baylor basketball postgame, your number one spot for Baylor basketball postgame in the nation. And I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show. Should get that out there first. But more pressingly, I told you earlier this week, if Baylor did not beat TCU at home, they have major problems. They have major problems. This is a panic situation in mid to late January here. Baylor now at 11-6, 3-3 in the Big 12 Conference, and 0 marquee wins this season. 0, not 1. Less than 1. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network where it's your team every day. And TCU takes this one. It's essentially a buzzer-beating victory. I mean, they score it with 5 seconds left. But 74-71 is the final. And the way this second half was going, it probably shouldn't have even been that close. Baylor kind of got lucky, made a play or two to get it tied. They're down 6. They hit a 3. They get the ball back off some pressure. That play that Roach gets hurt, and they end up hitting another 3 to tie the ball game. And it's looking like that game last year, and it ends the same way. Baylor loses 3 straight wins in Waco for TCU. 3 straight. First opponent to ever win twice at Foster Pavilion. And if you had told me that within 2 years of the national championship team that season, that TCU was going to be Baylor's bogey team, I would have thought you were nuts. Here we are. They don't beat TCU. They hate doing it, especially at home. Never do it. We finally get a win over them in football, and it just friggin' translates to basketball. We're done. This team sucks right now. And they've got a lot to figure out. Man. First half, they're going for the kill. Were they up, 12-13? They almost made it 15. Had a couple of chances to make it 15. And TCU woke up, and Baylor never responded. From the last 2 minutes of the first half all the way through the second half, TCU bullied the crap out of them. It was men against boys. TCU wanted to win. Baylor did not. And how many times do we say that this year? It's bad enough that you face good teams and get your ass kicked every time, but to then play a mediocre TCU team at home and lose and get tossed around like that, that's embarrassing. That's not the Baylor basketball I know. That's not the Baylor basketball of the last 5 years, or maybe even longer. This team just has no identity. They're just 5 guys out there. And I don't think anyone knows their roles. And if they do, no one's doing them. No one's performing those roles. But again, the lack of testicular fortitude from this team in second halves, it's just where's the pride, man? Where is the pride in this? You got smacked around the first 10 minutes of the second half, and it's arguably worse the next 10 minutes of the second half. What are we doing here, man? TCU, this team just lost to Utah at home. Maybe the Bears are in for a real test against Utah this week. Because they went out, they beat TCU, they beat BYU. They hotter than Baylor right now. You thought it was just a blip on the radar. You thought this was just a team that couldn't beat good teams. Newsflash, they can't beat mediocre teams either, apparently, at home. This whole week after the Arizona game, and I've been talking with a bunch of different Baylor people about this and just thinking, you know what? This is not a great team. This is not one of Scott's best teams at all. But you flash it back to, 2015, 2016, 2014, and you see those teams and you're like, okay, you win your home games. You kind of lose to some of the big guys, but you get into the tournament, and who knows from there, you can win a couple games to get to the Sweet 16. And now you're not doing that. Now you're not beating the teams you're supposed to beat, and you're not winning at home on the same day. And this does not look like an NCAA tournament team. This looks like an NIT team. Like that's I know we got plenty of season left to correct that if you're Baylor, but that's what we're looking at right now. This is not a team that gets into the NCAA tournament if it started today. Now, thankfully, it doesn't start today, but I'm running out of answers here. They're completely lost, mostly offensively, but certainly at the end of the game defensively too. And I thought Scott got outcoached today by Jamie Dixon. Jamie Dixon's best teams are 500 in the Big 12, and this is not his best team, not by a long shot. And I don't know what kind of team Baylor is. They're not a three-point shooting team. There was one thing that they were great at this year, which was they could out-rebound everybody. TCU flat out kicked their ass on the glass today. Just crushed them. Plus 16 on the glass. And for some reason, I don't get this. So I thought Baylor was an elite rebounding team. Turns out they're a pretty damn good offensive rebounding team. And the fact that that doesn't translate to the defensive boards, I don't understand it. I guess I'm not smart enough in basketball to understand why you're so much better at collecting the rebound, collecting the ball off the rim when it's your guy shooting it and not the other team. It baffles me. I have no grasp for how it is. But every game we look, and Baylor's either winning or right there in offensive rebounds, and now they're getting their butts kicked on the glass. Like I don't get it. They forced 11 turnovers in the first half, and only 6 in the second half. They didn't score any points off turnovers in the second half after 21 I think they scored that last 3. Would have counted as that. So 18 of that in the first half. And they just got bullied all game, man. And little thing, like we talked about it, the switching 1 through 5, it doesn't normally work. It worked in the first half. And then Jamie went to the clipboard. And then they just abused Baylor on the mismatches. Like that's getting out coached. And that last defensive series for TCU, I thought was actually a perfectly nuanced, good move by their coaching staff on the fly, which was they knew they were going to go to none on a wing 3 because he's the only guy who can really shoot threes out there and the only guy they trust to shoot a 3 of that magnitude. And who's out there guarding him? Ernest Uday. They probably didn't want none to be that open when he catches the ball. But at that point, it's like, they're not going to go for 2. Have a big body get in his face. Don't foul, but have a big body get in his face. And that's exactly what happens. The shot gets blocked. But this was embarrassing today, man. I don't know how to say it. Like, because my opinion has not changed on TCU and how good they are this year. But it's now changing on Baylor. Because I don't think TCU is very good, but they just beat you at home again. So maybe you're not very good. That's it. My opinion didn't change on TCU, but it's certainly changing about Baylor. I thought they could somewhat ease their way into the NCAA tournament, but this is going to be an absolute climb right now. Like, cue up the Hannah Montana. This is an absolute climb. They're going to scratch and claw to hear their name called on Selection Sunday. So yeah, less than a year after you get 2 all ACC players who played in the Final Four in the transfer portal and the biggest recruit in your history, I'm saying they're going to scratch and claw for the NCAA tournament. I really thought this was an Elite 8 team, a team that could challenge for the Big 12 championship. They're nowhere close to that right now. And there's time to figure it out, but not a lot of it. Like, if you don't know what your team is by January 20th with that non-conference schedule that you played, I don't know how to help you. I really don't know how to help you. It's just they're a team with, again, how many times have I said it this year? 0 identity. 0. And we're going to talk about Rob Wright later in the week. He ends up not having a great game after what was a pretty promising first half. Like, he didn't even score in the second half. He was 0 for 5 from the floor in the second half. Still had 8 assists on the game, split it evenly, 4 in the first, 4 in the second. But I think you get a glimpse in that. Rob Wright is your point guard. I think that was, again, from the first half, I think he made some mistakes in the second half, but this team looks better when he's running the point than than Jeremy Roach, but that's all moot with that second half performance. I mean, that was embarrassing, man. I don't know. I don't know how this team gets better. I think there's obviously the chance for them to get better, but I don't know how. This was a team that didn't show any fight today, and that's what sucks. Like we said it with the Gonzaga game, night number 1, and said it's not going to be like that again. You didn't lose by 40, but if you were playing a good team, maybe you would have lost by 40 because they, again, just no pride out there, man. Like just nothing. I don't get it. They're just going through the motions, man. And I don't know what it was with Norchad today. I don't know if he was sick or something, but Uday destroyed him. Like I know Norchad gets his 20 points? Yeah, gets his 20. 5 rebounds for the walking double-double for the NCAA's active leader in rebounds. Like as we're speaking right now live on YouTube, Jamie Dixon is pointing that out in the locker room, and they're dogpiling Ernest Uday. Because, I mean, he took Norchad to the cleaners today. 16 and 15. Took him right to the cleaners, man. I don't know. I don't know what's up with this team. I don't know who the good players are. I don't know what the good system is. And I think the coaches have to be searching for answers too. Because I'm thinking during this game, John Jacobs, to have him on this staff this year, I think would cure a lot. But it doesn't cure everything. And I just 25 3-pointers today. They're not a 3-point shooting team. They have a good guy inside in Omir. Didn't show it today. But they're stuck in between. They're either taking too many threes, or in the first part of the second half, they're force feeding Josh O every time down. Like Josh O's on a good stretch right now, but did we all just let that did they let it get to their heads? Took 2 field goals today. It took them out of the game. 3 rebounds, 2 points, 2 field goal attempts, and they're force feeding him in the second half as things are going wrong. 10-0 run, 13-2 run, and I'm seeing them just trying to get it to Josh Ojamuna. What was the point of getting these guys in the portal? What was the point of getting a top 5 recruit in America if you're going to force feed Josh Ojamuna when the game is slipping out of your hands? I need some answers for that. I'm sorry. I need some answers. Boston Straw, the effort in this team stinks. That's the most glaring thing every time out. Whether it's a good team, mediocre team, a bad team, they don't put out effort for 40 minutes. This just doesn't look like a Baylor team. It doesn't look like a Scott Drew team. I don't know whose fault it is. If you can even point it to one person, I don't think you can, but can at some point they look like they want to play? Can they look like a gritty team one time this year? Once? Abe says, sick of playing not to lose when we're up all game. I can't agree more. And he says it happened at Arizona State too. It happened a bunch last year. Whatever offense they actually have, they get out of it when it comes to having the lead late in the game. I don't understand it. They try to shrink the game with 6 or 7 minutes left, and they show their true colors offensively, which is they're an offensive team that doesn't have answers. They don't have shot creators. They don't have shot makers. So whenever you do actually have a dominant game on the offensive glass, it doesn't guarantee anything. Their only offense is being in transition and Rob Wright getting to the hole. But if you're playing a half-court offense in the Big 12, I love Rob Wright. I love what he's going to be for this team. But the 6'1" point guard can't be your only offense at the rim. He can't. Oh, man. I know, and I'm seeing it some in the comments now, and I know people are going to say it, and there's some truth to it, that the roster construction has not been good enough the last few years. There's absolutely some truth to that. Finley Booth is the one who says it here. And I see it all the time. And that's true. The roster construction should have been better the last couple of years, but this year in particular, this is a different animal. This is a different kind of bad structure. I don't know if they just missed out on the top guys. Maybe it was because they really wanted Adu and not Norchad Omir. I doubt it. I like Norchad, what he brings to the party, obviously outside of today, but I think they struck out on this. I really do. And Jeremy Roach, I've heard from a couple of people around that particular player and that program that he got a lot of money to come here. And part of that, like we saw in football with the Quan Finn, when you get a lot of money and you come in as a point guard, you're the point guard. And in reality, you should probably be the 2 guard with Jaden Nunn coming off the bench, which is what happened today. Rob Wright should probably be the point guard. And now you might have lost that sort of development. Like, I know Wright played a good amount in the non-con, but you're talking about trying to fit him in as the starter in late January. Like, he probably should have been the starter all season. Like, we should have saw this. Like, Jeremy Roach is a good 2 guard. He was a good 2 guard at Duke last year. Maybe it's a pride thing, but it's so bad. It's so bad. Bo says this team could score 1,000 points in a game, but our defense is so atrocious that we'll give up 1,007. I didn't see the defense as the problem tonight or most of the year, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any situation like whatever your actual equivalent of 1,000 is, they're not getting to it. They're not going to score 90 points in a conference game. They might not score 80 points in a conference game. They don't have that kind of creativity. They don't have that kind of shot making ability. Their defense has been honestly fine most of this year. They didn't get stops they needed to today, and that's still a huge issue. But the chief problem for me is what you have offensively. And you know, that, again, not to say the defense doesn't have any issues. Jamie Dixon was finding all the mismatches in this team today, but I think the offense is much, much worse than what the defense is showing you. And a lot of that, not a lot of grit, not a lot of fight. And that's a huge part of this where it needs to start. It's just wanting to play, like having that intensity. They don't have any kind of edge, man, any kind of edge. Boston says Norchad's the guy who will get 20 points. The media says he played well. I think any Baylor fan that watched the game wouldn't say, oh yeah, Norchad really put in a shift for us today. Boy, it was everyone else's fault. That's what you'll see in the box score. That's the ESPN Plus announcer will say the next game. But I think he got his butt kicked today. I really did. Ryan says he'd rather be a fan of Kent State. I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that, but if I was Rob Wright, I wouldn't want to return. That's going to be interesting because you don't normally see, like, a guy in Rob Wright's situation probably isn't going to transfer. I mean, he might test the waters of the NBA draft. I think that's probably still a year early. But if you're Baylor, you got to hold on to this kid. Next year, he will be excellent. And Fran said that a bunch today. He said it in the preseason as well. Like, this kid could be an All-American next year. But yeah, that would be key to keep him here. I think that would give you a good starting block for next year and actually have some continuity. Will says, I'm ready to completely scrap the one and done recruiting strategy. Hasn't translated well since the national championship. Bring back the guys with high upside. I agree. Let's say that. I agree. Now, that said, it's easier said than done with a program like Baylor. And I think there are a couple programs you can see in that category, programs like Duke or Kentucky, Kansas to a certain extent, although Kansas is handling it better than Baylor has. And that is this, like the era of the portal. You see so many more teams with one and dones with guys who are seniors rather than freshmen because of the portal. So it's going to be difficult. And I'm intrigued to see how Scott handles this of how do you get those guarantees to bring those guys back year after year with the portal being what it is. Baylor doing well in the NIL space, but still not what, Kentucky or Tennessee or Arkansas is. That's going to be very intriguing. But yeah, I think you need some roster continuity. That is the one thing you have not had since 2022, and your teams have all critically underachieved since then, including 2022, but you did have some continuity on that team. Anthony says, typical Scott Drew inconsistent. I don't know that that's a Scott Drew calling card. I mean, not to say that he hasn't I mean, he's obviously, this team is not doing well, but I don't know that that's a Scott Drew calling card, that his teams are always inconsistent. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. They consistently gone out in the second round the last 3 years. Play the Croatian. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen very much. Boston also pointing out Josh and Omi are combining for 8 rebounds is embarrassing, and he's exactly right. That's a microcosm of what was going wrong today. They absolutely got the piss beat out of them on the boards, man. Ryan says we have too many players who play for the NBA and not for Baylor. Yeah, I would say some other teams still succeed with that. You know, look at all the guys that UConn had drafted last year. But the other thing is UConn had roster continuity. Baylor never does. What happened to the women's assistant coaches? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows right now. We have some idea, but honestly, it's not enough for me to go on here, if we're being totally honest. Raj, please don't tell me we had a good practice on Saturday. It's a Dave Aranda thing. Scott will kind of twist his words in a different way. Yes. Yeah. This is not a good day. This is not a good day for Baylor basketball. And they've got to figure some real heavy stuff out pretty quickly. I would have loved a couple weeks ago to have seen Utah on that roster or on that schedule coming up, but because of the way they handled them the first time. But Utah looks like a basketball team now. They didn't on December 31st, but I don't know. Calendar change 2025. They look like a basketball team. And if Roach is hurt here, you know that's a loss for next game for your team. I mean, not like automatic loss, and that's going to be an excuse that we're going to hear. So I don't know. This is a low point. I don't know if it's the lowest, but this is a low point, man. Even at 11-6, like not being competitive with good teams is one thing, and that's not good, but at least it's better than losing to mediocre teams. Two things. When you can't, let me put it this way. When you can't compete with good teams the way Baylor has this year, you better do two things well. You better beat the teams that you're better than, and you better win at home. Today, they didn't do either of those things. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to do those things going forward. This is a team that is not in the Big 12 title race. They do not have a marquee win this year. The two that they had going into, the Christmas period have both fallen off. Arkansas stinks. St. John's is not looking like a tournament team right now. And neither are you. Like that's what we gotta talk about, man. This is not going to be comfortable for Baylor fans the rest of the season the way it has been the last few. Like, it's one thing to bitch about not competing for the Big 12 championship the last 2 years, which I think is warranted, but now you got to bitch about whether you can make the NCAA tournament, and that's a different animal. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. You guys have made this the #1 destination for Baylor basketball and Baylor basketball post-game shows. I really appreciate you guys. And thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We're going to talk a little bit about this in tomorrow's show, as well as Sawyer Robertson's Heisman hopes, because that's going to be a more fun thing to talk about. Let's just say that. All that and more coming up later. Thanks for making it your first listen today and every day on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.